Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
You're listening to Peace Fund Radio with Ethan Dettenmaier and Adrian Paul, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Yes. Good morning. But I've already done that.
Good morning again.
Good morning again. We for those of you that may not have heard us for the past couple of minutes, there was a reason for that because we weren't plugged in. We were talking away, saying good morning, how was your week, etc., and there all that dulcet tones got lost in the ether.
And
lots of top secrets, big secrets were lost.
Oh, see, he heard it.
Oh, you heard it.
Oh,
you heard it, John. See, the top secrets that were going to be released.
Like, this is a fantastic show. And then the tech runs in and goes, you guys aren't on the air. Like, wow, of course.
That's the power of live radio.
Right.
You know. So, John, you heard about all the top secrets. Well, not quite.
I did. It's very exciting stuff.
Well, yeah, kind of. Ethan, I was saying how much of a busy week you'd been having, right?
Yeah, I've been busy working on a top secret Adrian Paul related project. Well, the technicians have been working on it.
So have I. That must be going around.
Yeah, there's a lot of Adrian Paul projects going around at the moment.
Lots of like government type agencies pretending to work on things for the better good of society. But you've got the most exciting news, don't you, Adrian, if I'm not mistaken?
Well, that would be nice, wouldn't it? I'm off to Fort Lauderdale. I'll be announcing in a couple of days a new reality show that I'll be doing, which will be good, but I can't announce it right now. They want me to announce it when I get there.
Oh, okay.
It's one of those things. So, but I thought I'd tease it because I'll probably put it out on Mentions or Periscope first,
right,
and then I'll tweet it out and put it on Facebook and all that lovely stuff.
For people that are new to Periscope, where can they find you on Periscope?
Adrian Paul 1. Periscope's linked to my Twitter account. So
Adrian Paul 1.
Adrian Paul 1. Yep, indeed.
Exciting.
But it's been a busy weekend. I came back from a con in Las Vegas.
How'd that go?
It was fun. I mean, Vegas was fun. I actually won at poker, which was kind of interesting. I walked away a winner, which is what you have to do in Vegas. A lot of people don't do it. They win and then they keep going back and then they lose. And that's why the casinos make so much money.
Right.
But, the interesting thing, I tweeted out when I was in Vegas, I said, it's amazing the amount of money that's in this city. I'm sure Nevada will never go bust. And I got a lot of tweets from people saying, but there are so many issues with our educational system and a lot of the money doesn't come to us, et cetera, et cetera. And in actual fact, I was looking at a lot of the people on the streets. So a lot of people sleep on the streets, even in Vegas. So there are people that are suffering, even in an economy. I mean, in a sense, I find it a false economy because I'm not sure how much it benefits the state or where the money actually goes, but we're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars being made or spent in Vegas every day. I mean, it is so enormous what's going on there.
Yeah.
From the nightclubs to the restaurants to the casinos and and then there are a lot of people that are suffering, which is unfortunate.
Very unfortunate, actually. It's a big tragedy.
Well, you deal with homelessness a lot, and it's hard to see, especially when you have kids, to see the kids suffering from that. We talked about 9th Street School from the Peace Fund initiative.
Right.
That was the Microsoft services going into LAUSD schools, and the 9th Street picked up children, or helps children, should I say, from the streets.
That was actually, a lot of good came from that initiative you guys put in place, but in particular, the discovery of the real working conditions a lot of these teachers operate in was probably the most enlightening of that whole process, I think.
Yeah. Well, I'm supposed to be going back to visit some of the classrooms. Unfortunately, I've got a very busy schedule coming up. I will be leaving for England for about 10 days.
When's
on the 14th. My mother, basically, and my brother. My brother's coming from Thailand. I haven't seen him, and I haven't seen his son ever. So I haven't seen my brother in 5-6 years. So I thought it's a good time. Yeah, I haven't seen him in that amount of time. No.
But you travel so much. You never managed to get over there?
Not to Thailand. No, I haven't had a chance. So I'll get to see my mom. My mom's 93, so it's time to, if the family's together, you may as well do it. So while I'm doing that, I'm seeing my agent out there, et cetera, et cetera. Then I go on to fly back here. Then I go to Chicago for a reason. And then...
is it a mysterious reason?
It's a mysterious reason. But we'll announce that. But anyway, So it's busy. So it's busy, but I'm going to be able to hopefully get to these schools. I was going to try and get there before I left, but they're doing their end of semester, I think, finals. So I'm probably going in early May.
And speaking of family and schools, Ethan's daughter, Sean, who is a previous Peace Fund Radio Hero of the Week, has a special fundraiser on GoFundMe for that 9th Street school. You can find it at gofundme.com/9th Street Hope.
Yes,
Check it out.
My house is full of packs for those kids and blankets and stuff. We're going to start assembling them Tuesday with what we've got. We don't have a lot of resources. I mean, she didn't have anything to give anyone who contributed to the campaign, so she offered to make them a thank you card. And it didn't light the world on fire, shameless hacks that surround us in Los Angeles. But she did get some help, and she put some of her own money into it. So she's Tuesday's the day we start assembling packs, and hopefully we can do something on a regular basis.
This is something we've talked about before because we have a lot of Heroes of the Week that we have and we're connected to that actually do things such as the cards we talked about, the organization that sends cards to kids and the organization that sends computers and the ones that does books and some of our members, and this will be on our new Peace Fund site, which is almost ready, ladies and gentlemen, will actually do small things. We're going to be putting a lot of small things on there that you can do that doesn't cost you money necessarily, but it's your time. Maybe you like to knit. Maybe it's blankets you like to do. So
very cool.
Those things will be easy for you to do and send a few blankets to those kids that need it or people that need it, and we'll be putting that on our site very shortly as well. Obviously, we have been talking about several things last week. We had David Stern on the show talking, excuse me, my voice is dying, goodbye malaria. Yeah. And this week, and we have been talking a lot about education, and I wanted to bring education back this week because we've got a special guest on the show coming shortly, who is one of the Peace Fund actual board members, Carmel Macpherson. I've known for many, many years, fabulous lady. She actually went out with the Teachers Across Borders group to Cambodia recently and actually taught one of the classrooms there. So we're going to be talking to her a little bit later in the show in a very short period of time. But we're going to be talking about global education because every child has the right to an education. And one of the biggest contributors to global poverty, which is what we've been talking about, kids on the streets, is a lack of access to education. It's the key to a better future, a route out of poverty, and a fundamental human right. Today, education remains an inaccessible right for millions of children around the world. More than 72 million children of primary education age are not in school, and 759 million adults are illiterate and do not have the awareness necessary to improve both their living conditions and those of their children. Imagine that. So, I mean, we talked about this, how it has the domino effect, and most of our prisons around the country and around the world are filled with inmates that do not have an education, cannot read or write, and that's part of the reason they're there, because they turn to other means to earn a living. So educate them, it will change that process as well.
Lack of education also increases the likelihood that a child doesn't have access to clean water, doesn't have access to sanitation, and therefore is more susceptible to malnutrition, to sickness. There are just so many things that go along with it.
Yeah, I mean, the facts, John, are pretty, they're staggering when you always look at them, because 9% of kids of primary school age, basically between 6 to 11, they continue to be denied the right to education. Teaching children to read is the first step to solving a number of critical social, health, and developmental issues. But even the UN says that through the end of 2015, almost 100 million children are not completing primary education globally.
And 1 in 6 children in low and middle income countries will not complete primary school, or did not complete primary school in 2015. Half out of the school children who live in communities where the language used in schools is different than the one spoken at home. And more than half, 53% of primary school age children out of school who are not in school are girls. And we've heard a lot about that too with some of our charities who work in areas where girls are targeted for prostitution and crime because they're not in schools.
So I think we should try and get Carmel Macpherson on the phone, because I want to talk to her about Cambodia. That was obviously one of the real accesses to seeing how education. I actually spoke to Carmel yesterday about what the and she will reiterate it when she calls in, what the damage that Pol Pot created to the schooling system or the educational system in Cambodia, and what a small amount of money can actually do in countries such as this, where education, buying a book is not $30, it might be 50 cents. You can buy so much more and educate these children out of poverty. And I've always said this before, one of the things is you can always look at education as being something that will give people knowledge. Look at what happened this week in Brussels. What is happening to the world? People are bombing other people because of their religion. I'm sorry, I disagree with it. Islam or whoever else is doing it, and I don't believe you can blame a religion per se for that. I just believe you have to blame certain individuals who have been either corrupted to believe a certain way of life is the right way. But in human terms, being kind to somebody else is not necessarily a bad thing, and killing somebody actually is not a good thing. So I don't know who's teaching people certain things, and I always said this before. I remember seeing many years ago when the Gaza and the Israeli problem was at its infancy, although infancy, whenever you call that infancy, it was. I remember seeing news reports of a father holding his child up, who was probably about 4 years old, and holding a Kalashnikov in his hand, and he wasn't strong enough to hold it in his hand at that point, but he kept raising his son's hand to put it up. Then I'm thinking, well, I know there is a certain time you have to stand up for your rights, but there's certain things you have to teach your children, and that's not one I'd like to teach my kids.
Exactly.
So, do we have Carmel?
I'm in the process of making an international call here. A little challenging.
Well,
Sorry.
just while you're doing that, I just want to also mention, for the school year ending 2013, there were 124 million children and young adolescents, roughly between the ages of 6 and 15, that have never ever started school or have dropped out. And there are different areas of the world that are obviously more problematic than others, such as sub-Saharan Africa and South and West Asia. And therefore, you've got youth literacy rates are 70% and 84% respectively. So we've really sort of need education to be put in. Now, we also have dealt with other areas of the world. Apart from Cambodia, we've also dealt with our Teachers Across Borders program who take it into Cambodia. We've also had Mercy and Sharing who are now Haiti children. They've changed their name. That we send supplies to the kids that are living on the streets, and they take them out of, as you mentioned before, John, prostitution and child slavery and other things, and put them into a school where they give them clothes, medicine, and books to help them get out of that cycle of poverty.
And it's awesome, too, because Haiti children, they have a vocational school down there that teaches the kids skills, welding, plumbing, computers, things that they can use to lift themselves again out of that cycle. And we'd also mentioned the effect that this has on girls earlier before. There are currently 62 million girls around the world who are not in school. If all girls had access to secondary education, forced child marriages around the world would drop by 64%. And the number of child brides around the world would fall from almost 2.9 million to just over 1 million. So again, it's just the power of education, the opportunities it brings, and that's why we love working with these other organizations like Haiti Children that give those kids the power to lift themselves out.
Yeah, it is a cycle. I mean, the financial deficit of developing countries is obviously one of the things. There goes my phone. And that looks like it's Carmel Macpherson calling in, or Annie Christie trying to get to me. I love it, actually, that they call me on my cell. Annie, I'm on the show. Annie, if you can hear me, I can't pick up the phone. So, unfortunately, we're going to have to try and get Carmel another way. If maybe she can call in. John, what's the number that we have here on the show? Because I think you might have it better than I do.
I don't know that we want to give that out, but
well, the number on the phone we've given
is
out
it a classified number?
Classified, not the classified. No, the ones who actually call in the show. But anyway, listen. While you're doing
that number,
the number for callers. I can give that one.
818-602-4929.
Well, there we go. I mean, maybe I can get a hold of Annie Christie. Let's see if I can. What was the number again?
818.
Yeah, go ahead.
602.
Yep.
4929.
Okay. So in the meantime, I was talking about the financial deficit of developing countries. You got many emerging countries don't have the appropriate financial resources necessary to create schools or providing school materials or even recruit or train teachers. You know, the funds pledged by the international community are generally not sufficient enough to allow countries to establish an educational system for all their children. And that's one of the things I was speaking to Carmel, and hopefully we can get her on shortly.
Looks like I've got it.
To talk. Oh, maybe we've got
see
her
if
here.
This works.
Hello. Do we have? Hello, Carmel. Do we have you on the phone?
Yes, you do.
Hello. It's. We were having issues trying
Carmel.
to reach you at the moment.
Well, yeah, you're supposed to ring Annie's phone, I think, but I'm here.
Oh, okay. Well, Annie rang me just recently while I was on the actual air, and unfortunately, I could not pick it up. But how are you doing this morning? Where are you at the moment?
I'm in Boise, Idaho, and Annie Christie and I are busily cataloguing items for upcoming Peace Fund auctions.
Awesome. And I know you've been traveling a lot, and I think both. Did Annie go with you to Cambodia?
Yes, Annie came with me as my teacher's assistant.
Oh, your teachers. Okay, so I want to hear all about this, Carmel, because obviously we've mentioned teachers across borders before, and I want to hear what happened, how you got there, and what the process was.
Yeah, well, as you know, we've been supporting teachers across borders. The Peace Fund has been supporting teachers across borders. I think, Adrian, it'd be 5-6 years or so, assisting them to sort of get there, because teachers give up their vacations, they've got to pay their airfares, pay their accommodation, and so on. So it's a big thing that they do. And every January at Dettenmaier in Cambodia, they run between 10 and 15 workshops for teachers, up to about 20-25 in each class, and it's Teachers Across Borders has a memorandum of understanding with the Ministry of Education in Cambodia, so it's quite a formal program where the Ministry of Education obviously is very, very thankful and to Teachers Across Borders and those who support them, like the Peace Fund, to come in and really give professional education to teachers, because one of the horrifying facts that I came across when I was there, I mean, I knew it had been terrible in the Pol Pot regime, but honestly, to be on the ground in Cambodia and just to see the devastation as this country just attempts to rebuild itself was just extraordinary. There were 200,000 teachers in Cambodia in 1975. By 1979, when the Pol Pot regime, thank God, was ended, there were 5,000 of those 200,000 left.
That's 5,000 of that number of, how many did you say? 250,000?
200,000.
200,000.
195,000 were killed.
Teachers were killed. Yeah. I don't understand this.
Middle class.
And anybody in the middle class, I remember that. I mean, there was a huge slaughter of people during that reign. I mean, but it's interesting that the mentality is to kill teachers, to teach your children to get out of poverty, which actually helps the economy of the country. Why would that be? Why was that done? I don't understand the mentality behind that.
He had, I mean, the irony, extraordinary irony, Adrian, is that Pol Pot himself was a history teacher. He was educated in Paris. A lot of the people that formed his murderous council were actually intellectuals. And you find this with a lot of dictators. The first thing they want to do is to get rid of any other intelligent, educated people. And his grand vision for Cambodia was a return to an agrarian society of basically ignorant peasants and farmers. So he proceeded to slaughter 3 million out of 7 million people. Anyone that had glasses, anyone who had soft hands, not calluses, they and their families were just rounded up and killed.
The thing is, though, what what's interesting, Carmel, is not just Cambodia that has that issue about, keeping the population subjugated to a certain degree. I mean, obviously there are many girls. We've talked about the difference between the education in girls and boys. In sub-Saharan Africa, you've got 12 million girls that are at a risk of never receiving an education, and in Yemen, there's 80% of them will never have the opportunity to go to school. So, and they're not even trying to change that gap. I'm wondering whether the male population is scared that their women will actually overtake them at some point, and that's why they're stopping them from doing it, or whether it's a religious reason. Is there anything does anything like that still occur in Cambodia? Is there anything there like that?
No, and in fact, there's a huge push by the current government to who understand that the key to rebuilding Cambodia is literacy and is education. But see, a teacher in Cambodia, they just had their salaries doubled from $100 US a month to $200. So
$200 a month.
Wow.
$200 a month. And as a result, of course, most of them, every teacher that I worked with and spoke with was working 2 or 3 jobs,
Right.
and because school starts at 7:30 in the morning, so there's 2 sessions every day. And they have as you can imagine, when you're trying to rebuild an entire country, particularly where a lot of the land has had landmines still in it, is that the kids are needed for labour on the farms. So attendance at school is a massive problem, and dropouts. So the particular workshop that I was running, and how I came to run this was actually, a very fairly typical Carmel story. As you know, Sue Slater and her husband Ken have been going there for about 9 years now. And they run a workshop for principals, and Sue said, and we had been saying for a while, look, we'll come across and just observe and have a look at what you're doing and basically see how these funds are being spent, and just to get a much better handle on what's really happening here. And Sue, who is a very old friend of mine and someone that I talked with, decades ago, said, oh, well, why don't you run one of the workshops? And typical me said, oh, yeah, sure. And and then I sort of started to think about it over the next few weeks, and I thought, it's sort of like been 40 years since I actually was in front of a class, and then I'm going to be having to do this through a translator.
It's like riding a bike.
Yeah, you'll get used to it.
I was thinking, okay, I think you might have bitten off a bit more than you can chew here, but and anyway, it's
so how did it go? How did it go? What was it? What was the process? You got in? How many pupils were in the class that you taught?
About 22 teachers.
It's interesting because there's around the world all the different facts of which I think is fascinating. There are certain different school sizes around the world. Mainly, here in the US we have about 20 kids in the classroom on average, I would say. In Australia, the School of the Air broadcast lessons via radio signals to far-flung pupils living in remote areas. So they basically have a much larger audience. In Turin, Italy, it's the smallest school in the world, and it has 1 pupil in 2014, and their mantra is that as long as there's at least one pupil in the school, they've decided to keep it open. And the largest school in the world, for everybody out there, what do you think the largest number of pupils? John, you know the answer, so don't answer it. What do you think the largest amount of students in a school is, and what country is it? We'll leave that open. What's your guess, Carmel?
Oh, the largest. I'm just thinking of countries. I suppose I'd say China. China maybe.
Okay. And how many students do you think it has in the school?
Maybe a high school of 10,000.
Okay, so you got 10,000
that'd be huge. I'm really going big. But,
okay, all right. So we'll answer that in a second when we get to all of you. You can all find that out in the moment. But I want to hear more from Carmel right now. You mentioned to me yesterday that there was a lack of materials in these schools. What was the
Yes. Yeah, the average class size is about 60. And in fact, if you go back to I don't know what yours was like, but mine in the 50s and 60s, the traditional 2 to a desk, rows of desks. It's very much that, so there's up to 60 students in each class, and we went out and visited some rural schools, and we looked around, and all the things that are just so typical that you would expect to see in any sort of modern school, of course, they're just not there. They're like a 1930s country school, if you like, and the water is often a well in the middle of the. Now this literally that the kids would be pumping, and we looked around. She took us to the library, and I sort of looked at it and I thought, oh no, it's just sort of old books, and English is very much sort of, they try to teach English as a second language, and they were just hardly any there, and some old posters, peeling posters, and the workshop I was running was, how to engage students and how to actually make learning fun. And I looked around and I thought, I don't think I'd find this much fun. So on behalf of the Peace Fund, I offered to actually take her shopping, and we went to a big resource centre, and we bought a lot of books and a lot of beautiful big colour posters, and you can imagine she was just sort of beside herself. But what stunned me was how much you can buy at the end of the day, really, for a relatively small amount of money. So
how much would a book cost there?
A book. Well, we spent about $300, Annie. We spent about $300 US, and we got probably 5 big bags full of books, and and posters. So, I mean, you can buy books for like 50 cents, I
was right. You see, I said it early on. I said it's 50. You can buy here, they're like $20. There, they're 50 cents probably, and I was right.
Yes. It's So it just struck me how with just some of those posters going up in all of the classrooms in the school, and you can have such an enormous ripple effect with such a small outlay. And that's why Sue and Ken teach workshops to school principals. And the principal of this particular school had been through one of the TAB workshops 2-3 years ago, and it had such an impact, she'd really turned this school around.
When you say it has an impact, what type of impact does it have?
It very much in terms of the techniques that they could start to use in the classroom, because a lot of the teachers are not that well educated or trained themselves. So a lot of what we were doing was teaching them things. There were literacy workshops, mathematics ones, but teaching games, showing them how they could use games in the classroom, showing them that the children didn't have to be sitting there stiff all day while the teacher just stood out the front as the font of all wisdom, showing them how, even by just getting the children to turn around, because these are big heavy desks, you could do group work. That basically learning can be fun, teaching them that I think, Adrian, I know with your 2 children, you suggest it's like having 5 sometimes, and that people's brains are different. Some children are highly creative. Some people are visual learners. Some are oral learners.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Carmel, because I think that's part of the Peace Fund's interactive storytelling program that we're about to launch. We have 10,000 books we're going to be taking around the LAUSD schools. The idea is to take celebrities and myself and other readers into schools and act out the stories with the kids so that they get engaged in it. And I think that's, when you said creative, I think that's one of the things all kids have in common. Doesn't matter where they come from, they all have a creative side to them. And for them to actually get engaged in the book by creating their own characters allows them to get involved in it and able to read it and have fun with the reading of the book itself.
And that's how you create lifelong learners, exactly. There's an Australian author called Graham Bass who does some absolutely fabulous books, Animalia and so on. Anyway, just before we left, we noticed he'd just done a new one called The Last King of Angkor Wat. We thought, oh my God, how fabulous is that? So we took that, and our translator translated it into Khmer, and so it was an actual Cambodian myth and there were all these magnificent pictures and drawings of Angkor Wat. Well, you can imagine how children in the classroom would react to that. And, and what you said about creativity is, children are never more creative than before they're 5, and we invariably at schools tend to bash that out of them.
You mentioned Angkor Wat. Now, for those that don't know, where is Angkor Wat?
Angkor Wat is in Siem Reap. So when you float, you're just out of Siem Reap, and
which is in Cambodia, correct?
Sorry,
it's in Cambodia, correct?
In Cambodia, yes, yeah. And it had been completely taken over again by the jungle. So there's this huge temple complex that was built in between the 11th and 14th centuries. So, in fact, anyone who saw Raiders of the... What was it called? Angelina Jolie's movie, Tomb Raider.
Tomb Raiders. Yeah, Tomb Raider, yeah.
Yeah, Tomb Raiders.
Was based on that.
When Angelina Jolie is very sort of well known in Cambodia, because that Cambodia had such an impact on her when she filmed that, and it was filmed at Angkor Wat. And that's actually when she adopted her first child, I think Phoenix, was it? And she's there filming at the moment an incredible book called First They Killed My Father, and it's the story of the Pol Pot regime. And she's doing a movie on that, and she has funded a huge landmine removal program. And that's what happens when you go to Cambodia.
That is one of the issues, isn't it? One of the issues is, when you're dealing with emergencies such as flooding or war, there is a residue that happens because of it. In Syria right now, half the kids are missing out of school, and at least a quarter of the schools have been damaged or destroyed. Sierra Leone has nearly 2 million kids forced to abandon school because of the Ebola virus. And landmines are one of the other things. We have war, they just walk away and all the stuff is just left there. And kids, get amputees, which I think is tragic.
Yes. So it's interesting when you start these workshops and you have these teachers, and many of them have to come in a long way, and no one ever sort of quite knows how it's going to go. But by the end of it, we have them sort of keep workbooks as they go through, and by the end of the 10 days, they have a whole lot of techniques that they can start to use with the children that will hopefully get the children engaged in some method of lifelong learning, to let them see that learning can actually be something very stimulating and challenging. It doesn't have to be very boring. So, because it's a big process to rebuild literacy from scratch, basically. What strikes you is you see very few old people, of course, because so many of them, 3 million were killed. Yeah. So these children, you see a lot of people in their 30s, but you don't, of course, because that whole generation, for the most part, was killed. So
I find it interesting that you said that you have there's different ways to teach children. There's so many different countries around the world that have different teaching systems, and I think there's something to be said about sharing that information, because you're sharing a Western knowledge to the way they're teaching currently in Cambodia to people that might not have as much experience. I think that's one of the key things as well. Apart from just financial aid that you can give a country, you can also give them some intellectual aid, because so many other countries do it differently. Finland, for instance, one of the oldest school starting ages in the world, as well as one of the most successful educational systems it has. They start their kids at 7 years old. Now, Bangladesh has, because they've got a lot of flooding problems, they have boat schools with boats. There's no less than 100 boat schools there, each one with internet access and a library, and it's solar powered. And going back to my original question as to what was the largest school in the world, is actually in India. And it's a City of Montessori school, and it has over 32,000 students.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I find that wow.
They do the school assemblies.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly. Can we assemble, please? It would be, and the interesting thing is, so many different countries do it differently. Holland, they start school every kid starts school on their 4th birthday. It's not like you start the school year because of this cutoff date, like they have in the United States, on your 4th birthday. So there's a new kid in school every month or 2 weeks or whatever. And in Icelandic schools, knitting is taught as one of the subjects. And look at Brazil. Brazil has where lunch is very important, of course.
I like this one a lot.
Yeah, children start school at 7 a.m. and at noon go home to eat with their parents, which I think is not a bad thing in a sense because you're having time with the family, which I think is another thing. I think some of these things that we have around the world can be shared knowledge. Finland has one of the best educational systems and diplomas in the world. I think it's 7th off the top. Apart from the United States, is 28th in the world. So I mean, it's kind of interesting to be able to share some of this information.
Yes, and you've got to do it carefully because we're at pains to point out, look, we're not here to say that this is right and this is what you have to do. All we're saying is these are techniques that we know work for the most part with children, not only in Australia, but usually in any environment. And really, you've only got to look to your own children to see that, kids who supposedly have ADD quite often have no problem paying attention to something they're interested in.
Right.
And it comes back to what they like to call a kinesthetic learner. Adrian, I suspect you're a kinesthetic learner. And that's somebody who's very, physical. They like to sort of touch things, to do things, to and quite often those kids get into trouble at school because you'll see them fidgeting and
sounds like my son.
But yeah, and that's what I mean about it. So if they suddenly find themselves in a classroom, let's say where the teacher is an oral learner themselves, that teacher has a tendency to just teach to clone themselves. And so the kids that are oral learners in the class will do really well. But I know I'm a very visual learner, so I would take prolific notes because I'm really creating a picture of what I'm hearing. And that's why it's important for teachers to understand that quite often children aren't being naughty. They may well be bored because they're disengaged.
But there's also another issue. I think there's another issue. I mean, and Finland, I happen to mention Finland again because I know this for a fact. In the United States, for instance, when you have recess, you've got a 15, 20-minute recess. In Finland, it's 45 minutes. And what that does is there's less time spent in the classroom, but it's more concentrated time, purely and simply because the kids' energy, you're talking about kids fidgeting in class, boys especially, and some girls have a massive amounts of energy, and they've got to get rid of it first before they can concentrate. And that you're talking about visual, and some of it they have to get rid of that first before they do it. Yes. So I mean, it's not kids got ADD. It's just they've got all this energy, and it's not a bad thing.
Yes.
Now, unfortunately, in the United States, we give them a pill, but we can tell them to calm down, which I have an issue with.
Well, I shouldn't laugh, and it's tragic. And in fact, one of the things that we did with them, in fact, because they got to experience that actually as students, because I was out the front with the 2 translators. And they were sitting in those desks because we were running these in a school. And, of course, they started to get really, stiff and whatever. And I use that as an example of children are the same, And so, we'd get up and tell them to, walk around, to run on the spot, to do those sorts of things, but to remember that when they were keeping children just sitting there for hours and hours. So a lot of it, to be honest, is just common sense, really.
What do you think? What do you think is the biggest thing you're taking away from that experience, Carmel?
How much can be achieved with so little. In our case, it was time, giving time, but also I know from just talking with a number of the teachers and some of their families, when we want to raise money through the Peace Fund, and just honestly, what $50 can do. If people just knew what a ripple through the generations they could make by just sending us in those dollars and those $5 and those $10. You know, you really can make a very positive difference in the world. You might never actually know what it is, but I can tell you your fingerprints will be there, and they will ripple down the generations, because any child that stays in school and becomes more literate as a result, and then, you know, is able to actually help rebuild a country. My God, what a legacy is that, you know?
Well, I've always said, you know, I mean, we unfortunately, we're gratified today with the internet and social media and how good we look and how famous we can be, and everybody wants to be famous. But to be totally honest, it doesn't matter how famous you get. Eventually, that fame will die. Yes, you might be Elvis. You might be, you know, some amazing movie star that never gets forgotten. But to be totally honest, I don't think never is a very long time. You give 50 years, and the kids of today have no idea who Cary Grant was, or
no,
you know. I mean,
no.
so I mean, some of the biggest movie stars in the world today, it doesn't matter. But I guarantee you, 50 years ago, if you change the schooling system, or change the way an atom was made, or brought in the internet, it's now caused a huge, massive ripple in the way people live their lives, and that's your imprint, and that's your legacy on this planet.
Yes, yes, and the whole concept of guardianship, I think, as well. I mean, our translator, you know, I just never saw him without a smile on his face. And when I actually spoke to him at length and discovered what a typical day is for him and his wife, they get up at about 3 a.m. They run a little cafe shop near the market until about 6:30. He then goes to the school and teaches at school until about 12:30ish, about noon. Then he goes to a second school. He's then doing his masters at night. He completely supports two of his two brothers' families who fell on, well, they're all on hard times. You just stand there. You just go, and
you know, the thing is, Carmel, I think that the issue is that a lot of the time, and this happens in our society, even though it's an affluent society per se, the issue is that people don't necessarily want to work for it, and that's why the Helping Hand program on the Peace Fund is called Helping Hand, because we don't want to give a hand out because it doesn't serve anything. And I know this happens in social services a lot of the time when people are down and out in their luck and they're given things by somebody else. At first it's I don't want to take this because I'm too proud to take it. Then it's like, well, I shouldn't be taking this because I can get my own job. Then it's like, I expect this because nobody else is giving me a handout, so I might as well take this one. So I think the problem is that you need to be able to infuse a certain amount of pride in somebody, even if it's raising some small amount of money, or something that you engage people in doing their own business in raising it and putting an effort into it. If they have no effort, they have no care in trying to create an effort eventually. So that's a huge problem. Yes.
I agree. And so, I mean, it's the old adage of hope springs eternal, really. I saw this when I was in Bangladesh back in the mid-'80s as well. You know, you see these people that have just been through such horrors, and yet they have this sort of joy still, you know, and this resilience, this determination, you know, to rebuild. And it just puts everything in perspective in your life.
Right.
You know, you just of what's really important. But you know, it then comes back to reading. I always used to say, if kids can read, they'll be okay. You know, because then they're not sitting there as just fodder for talkback radio and, you know, shock jocks and so on. You know, because once you can read, you start to think, and that was actually one of the key things that we were doing with them, was teaching them critical thinking and reasoning skills, and some of the Edward de Bono stuff, you know, on how to take a problem apart, you know, because the Ministry of Education gets that as well, is that we need good thinkers in Cambodia. We need problem solvers, you know.
Well, I think you need those.
So that to pick up your point, we're not just sitting there waiting for good-hearted Westerners to come in and solve our problems for us.
Right. Well, I think that applies all over the world. And Carmel, thank you. I'm going to have to cut you off now because we are now got 4 minutes left on the show.
The leg off an iron pot. Yes.
Well, as they say in Australia, I hope you're pulling up okay today.
I'm pulling up really well.
When I heard about that,
you pulled up well.
Yeah, I hope you pulled up well. It's a very strange saying, but anyway, Carmel, thank you for joining us this morning. I hope to see you soon in LA on the way back. Say hello to Annie and continue.
Bye, John.
Building.
Bye, Ethan.
Thank you.
So good hearing from you, Carmel. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So, I think it's, as Carmel said, it's not just I think sometimes you learn things when you go out and actually see it in the field, and it applies to so many different countries and situations that we all are affected by, or that we are in ourselves. Education, it's vital for all kids and critical in different times, especially during emergencies like the Pol Pot regime when so many people were killed. I mean, the average length of conflicts around the world is 12 years, average. That means people are displaced from their home for an average of 20 years, which basically then translates to children being denied access to schooling for several years, many missing out completely, with the result that the whole generations have been denied the right to education. And as I said before, the economy then suffers, and that's what's going to happen in the United States of America if we don't give the education to our kids to be able to fill the jobs that are going to be needed in the next 10 years in this country. So it's not just a problem that exists elsewhere. It exists here as well. And I think education is a very key fact to solving some of the issues that we have. I want to give a shout out, obviously, to Teachers Across Borders, just to mention who they are. Their mission is to improve the quality of teaching that directly impacts student learning through professional development by using effective strategies, materials, and resources. They host an annual teacher professional development workshop in Cambodia, South Africa, and Myanmar, which some of you might have to look up, but it's, again, in Asia. There's also Kids Go Global, which is kidsgoglobal.net. They are a place for elementaries, junior and senior high schools to explore global issues and then work alone or with NGOs to take action locally and internationally. It also supports students acting out the issues using theatre and provides opportunities to share student work and projects. John, do you have any other updates for us right now?
Very quickly, go to thepeacefund.org/wells_bring_hope.html to contribute to our latest initiative to fund another well with our friends at Wells Bring Hope in Niger. Also, Pounds for Peace is back. Let's get healthy, people. The Peace Fund is relaunching Pounds for Peace. We have Camille and Megan, who are personal trainers, who will be on the Facebook group to give you information, fitness, nutrition, goals, quotes, etc. at facebook.com/groups/Pounds for Peace. And that's the numeral 4, Pounds for Peace.
Now, you want to mention what that's about, John. Pounds for Peace, for those of you that don't know about it, is basically you getting a little fit or whatever and getting other people to sponsor you doing it and donate the money to charity. Simple. You win, so do the kids.
Absolutely. And finally, you can be a Peace Fund Radio episode sponsor. For a donation of $250 or more, you can dedicate an episode of your choosing to someone special. You can find a link to the support wall on our homepage at thepeacefund.org. And if you have any questions, you can email bev at thepeacefund.org to coordinate the details of your dedication.
Well, thank you, John. I'm going to leave you all with a couple of very interesting facts. The oldest boarding school in the world is King's School in Canterbury. Even though it started in 1567, it provides full modern education complete with up-to-date quality equipment. And the highest school in the world, at 5,373 meters above sea level is, and if I can say this, Pumakatang in Tibet. Thank you for you listening to us. John, thank you for bringing us all that information today. And thank you to Beverly Shahara. All of you out there listening, we will bring you some more interesting stuff next week. I am about to get onto a plane now for Fort Lauderdale. I will be talking to all of you via mentions and Periscope, probably, announcing a couple of new things. And also, in closing, a quote by Derek Bock. If you think education is expensive, try ignorance. This is Adrian Paul and Ethan Dettenmaier. We'll see you again.
You're listening to Peace Fund Radio. with Ethan Dettenmaier and Adrian Paul, right here on LA Talk Radio.